This episode of Wizards, Warriors and Words is brought to you by our wonderful patrons, including our new patrons, Daniel Henderson, Drew McVitie, and Lloyd Morley. If you would like to help support Wizards, Warriors and Words on Patreon, just go to patreon.com/Wizards, Warriors, Words, and you can check out the various bonuses that you can get for supporting the show on there. Things like free advanced reader copies of our new books, editorial feedback, and priority Q&A access. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Wizards, Warriors and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Jed Herne, author of Across the Broken Stars, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, starting with Mike.
Hi, I'm Mark Lawrence, author of the Prince of Thorns trilogy.
I'm just Dyrk Ashton. I'm author of the Paternus trilogy. And I went out of order.
I don't know. In that case, I'm going to be Felix Ortiz, the artist of covers like this one.
Rob is holding up a cover of Pawn's Gambit at the moment for our listeners,
So
which looks amazing. I've still got to get my copy of that. Awesome. So today's episode is going to be all about openings. So not orifices, as Mike was hoping earlier, but how to start your book instead. So to begin with, we need to start with the most important and serious question there is for how to begin your book, which is, Rob, what letter should you begin a book with?
The last letter that you finished the last book with.
I love it. That's why I all this time I was wondering why your books were so good, and now it is.
I mean, in all fairness, I get Mike to write the first letter of every single book.
That was some great advice. No one listened to Rob.
That's always good advice.
Okay, no, I promise I have some serious questions here. So what do you kind of look for? Let's start with opening lines. So the very first sentence of your book, what are you trying to do? What sort of considerations do you have for this opening line, if any at all? Mike, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the opening line, it sets the tone for the book for me. I'm always trying to capture something. I want it to be something different. Hopefully it should catch attention. Maybe if I pull it off really well, there will be some poetry to it, to how it sounds, to the words, to the whole thing. But what inevitably happens is I write this first line that I'm absolutely in love with, and then later I ruin it by maybe adding a prologue or an epigraph or something. And then there's every single fucking book, there's something else ends up being before my beautiful first line. So my beautiful first line is not my beautiful first line. It's another fucking line. So I don't know. I'm really bad at that.
So basically skip your prologues, skip your epigraphs, and if you're a reader, just go straight to the first line and then go
read
back
my first line, then you can go back. Yeah.
That makes total sense.
What you should just do is have that first line on its own as a prologue.
That is brilliant.
A one sentence prologue. I love it.
Yeah.
I have actually read some really good short prologues that aren't one sentence, but they're like a couple of sentences.
Yeah,
and
one sentence
is
is
stunning.
It's crazy. That's madness. Right, Rob?
No, man. If you don't need more than that. If you're going for more than one sentence, you're a sellout.
That's an epigraph, yeah. Which is weird that an epigraph is at the beginning of the book, but an epilogue is at the end of the book.
That doesn't make any sense.
Mind blown.
Dyrk Ashton exposes publishing hypocrisy.
It should be called a prolograph.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Prograph?
Yeah.
A prepograph. That's what I'm going to call it.
And that's why.
This episode is going off the rails quickly, isn't it?
Well, we are talking about openings, and this is a great example of how to have an unfocused opening that will throw off your listeners, but hopefully provide a lot of interesting tidbits.
So what you're saying is we planned it from the beginning.
Of course, it's all part of the plan. And
I don't think that. I mean, none of my books really start the same. I had decided I agonized, and honestly, I would say just start writing and worry about that later. You can go back, very often you can get a much better idea of what the tone of your book is and what kind of the characters they are, only when you've already written maybe quite a bit, if not all of it. So then you go back and tweak the opening. You find that maybe you can cut some of the stuff that you had put in and just start, well, why don't I just start with this, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. My the first book, Paternus, just start, I mean, the first words in the first chapter are, I mean, I went with just a classic description of setting. From the roof of a sold-out concert hall, tinted beams of searchlight wave at the full moon, a gray smudge in the murky Detroit sky, blah, blah, blah. But book two, I started straight in with dialogue, which if you've read my books, you'll notice I do that a lot with chapters. It helps me a lot to get into the in media res, jump in usually in the middle of a chapter, but in the middle of a conversation that's going on, and usually with something more shocking. The second book starts with dialogue, and it's just, he is dead. He's not dead. He looks dead. Stop saying that. And that's how the second book starts. But I think about openings in terms and beginnings of books in terms of movies, of course, dude, because that's all I have in my head. And I miss I miss the movies that have a nice long credit sequence to help me get into the mood, right? Slower things to help me settle down, stop thinking about the trailers, stop thinking about the sales of the popcorn and the silencing your phone, and get into the movie. I'm not a big fan of the newer style of just jumping right in to the film and doing the credits later. I like pre-credit sequences though, where you'll have something and then the credits for the film will come in sometimes.
A prologue.
Yeah, kind of. But so what I do is I have kind of a prologue. It's a short prologue. And sometimes that and an epigraph. An epigraph would just be a couple lines of a song that I can get the rights to put in there, or something pulled from an ancient text, and or somebody like the prologue in my first book in Rise of Gods is an unknown character speaking about the timelines of history and how these characters view these things. And then I'll have a little glossary. And, I like to put that kind of stuff in because I like to see that kind of stuff in books. It's like if I had, I mean, the thing I hate about Kindle is they set that first page to the first page in the chapter. So I hit my Kindle, I open up a new book, and it goes right to that. I didn't even get to look at the cover, right? Really? So I always flip back and see what else is in the front.
Me too.
So I can get into it, because otherwise it's like those movies that just start. And I hate that. For me, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I want to settle into a new story, not just go bam, 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 book to book to book. So I'll even read some of the stuff at the end of the book to ease myself out of it. If it's a particularly good book, I often have to do that, decompress a little bit. But so I prefer books that way. So that's the way I write my books. I know some people hate that stuff and they really just want to get right into it. They just want to start the movie right now. Let's go. So
I never actually had that articulated for me, but I realize now that you're saying this, I'm totally the same. Like, I love the fact that, like with Rhythm of Law recently, I love the fact that I open it up there's beautiful illustrations in, then there's like a map, then there's like, you know, a foreword by the author, then there's, you know, like some more illustrations, and then it's only by the time that you get probably like 20 pages in or whatever that you actually start reading the story. And yeah, it just like, it really sets you into that world in a way that, yeah, makes you just sort of forget about everything else and get really immersed. Also, another quick thing I should point out is, for people listening to this right now, if you want to see like how we do our opening lines in action, if you go to the Amazon store, you can usually read the first 10% of our books for free on there or whatever. So you can actually check out our opening lines and see how
the look inside.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you
just
can check that out.
click the look inside, and you may have to scroll back a little bit, but very often you can see how the books are set up.
And especially for, I hope you don't mind the compliment here, Dirk, but especially for Paternus, like the first 2 chapters of that are some of the best opening chapters I've read in years.
Thank you.
It
Wow.
just so like yeah, like it kind of like really blew me away, because I don't normally have that reaction with opening chapters. Like, it usually takes me a while to sort of get into a book.
It's almost like he's good at this.
Yeah, like
don't go so
surprisingly
far.
So.
Because he outsourced the first 2 chapters to you, though.
Well, yeah, I'm a genius. I'm fucking fantastic at
This
2
really
chapters.
Is
that's all I can do.
Compliment of Mike, but I just didn't want to compliment him directly. But that, like the chapter with I think it's Khyber in the concert hall, where it's
Kabir, yeah.
It just sort of is very cinematic in how it sort of starts on the rooftop with these searchlights, and then it sort of goes into the concert hall, and it's, yeah, you feel like you're in a camera that's sort of zooming in from the night sky of a city into this concert hall, and then down into this character eyes. And yeah, just like do yourself a favor and read that. It's amazing. And yeah, it sets the tone very well for the rest of the book. So
I feel
that's
all warm and fuzzy inside now. You know, it's
well,
funny
well
because,
deserved, man.
I mean, my book has a pretty high DNF rate. Did not finish, for those who might not know what that means, because it bounces perspective to perspective.
Yes.
And the second book, I spend some time with some young characters, one of whom does a little whining, and people are often turned off by that. The first chapter, most people really like, but then it goes to another story, then another one. Now, never mind that Game of Thrones does that all over the place, or any number of other books do exactly the same thing. But some folks just don't like that, and I can't blame them. But I know that there are kindred spirits like Jed that enjoy that kind of thing. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. It was well written. Before we get into Rob, I want to ask you about your sort of approach to opening lines, because you have written the most opening lines out of all of us, with like 14-ish books published or so. Something like that.
That's impressive.
I think it's over 13 or 14 at this point. I
have 3.
It's a lot.
14. No, it is 14. Yeah, I think it's 14.
But before we get into that, I would like to talk a little bit about our Angry Robot books. Do you guys want to bring out your parts and talk about that a bit? Someone else can talk about it if they want. I don't have to.
I don't have mine, but
you don't have yours.
This showed up the other day. I haven't cracked it yet, but it's next up on my to read pile.
That is
the Moonsteel Crown by Stefan Diaz, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. Might be Stephen, might be Diaz, might be, I don't know. I'm terrible at this.
This is the professionalism.
But yeah, it's super cool that publisher sending us books to read. That's awesome.
Yeah, they actually the folks at Angry Robot actually contacted Jed because they were aware of the podcast and gave us lists of books to see if we would want them, and we were like, yes, please. and I totally freaked out and leaped when this was on the list. The Maleficent 7 by
I got that one too,
by Cam Johnston. And this one I was like, those all look good, but I don't have enough time to read them, but I will read that one. Send me that one. And this sounds like so much fun. It looks like a play on the Magnificent Seven, but there's but with a necromancer, a vampire lord, a demigod, an orcish war leader, a pirate queen, and a twisted alchemist who basically have to like stop this war. Bunch of villains who get thrown together. And I
I'm
can't
reading
wait
at the
to see
moment,
that.
and it's
Are ya?
pretty damn good. Yeah. I'm actually most of the way
Yeah.
through it at the moment. I'm down to like the finale,
Yeah,
and it's kind of like the Suicide Squad meets Kings of the Wild or something like that.
Awesome. That's exactly what I was hoping. But Cam wrote these. This is the Age of Tyranny duology, and these are absolutely fantastic. So
Can you
I
just read
was
the titles of
really
those out for our
really
listeners?
excited to get a hold of this. So
The
thanks,
Traitor God
thanks,
and
Angry Robot people.
Something else?
Thank you,
What was-
Angry
what was the second one
Robots.
called?
Dirk, could you just read the titles of those out loud for people who are just on the audio only feed listening to this?
Oh, this one. Sorry. Cam's first two books, the Age of Tyranny duology, The Traitor God and God of Broken Things. Fantastic books.
Awesome.
And this one, the new one I got, this is the first in his new. I think this is a trilogy. Going to be a trilogy. The Maleficent Seven.
God of
Awesome.
Broken Things is such an awesome book title. I'm kind of, I might steal it.
I was going to say, it sounds
We can
like
do
a
that,
book
right?
title you would
Yeah.
use.
Just change
yeah, I
one
totally want
word.
that.
You'll be fine.
I get rid of
Call it
the.
Demon of Broken Things.
Demigod of Shattered Things.
Yeah,
God of Broken Toys.
there you go.
There is one of those, I swear.
Yeah, so massive thanks to Angry Robot for sending those through. Any other publishers, if you want to send us books, we're not.
Oh, I like it. I like that one, Jed. Yeah. It's like anybody else, give us some
Smooth.
books.
Give us.
We
some
will
books.
read them. We may even invite your authors on the podcast.
Exactly. We may get their names horribly wrong when we're saying them out loud in this episode. I'm sorry if that's the case, but that is the professionalism that you can expect from this show. So there we go. So Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about your approach to opening lines?
I mean, to be honest, like most things, I pants it. I don't plan the opening line; it just comes to me.
Yeah.
But I do try to have like a hook in the opening line. Sometimes, you look at or think about the opening lines that stick with people over the years, and you've got ones like Neuromancer, where it's like the sky was the color of a TV turned to static, and it's so like so vibrant. I mean, these days you probably don't know what it means, but kids these days, they don't know they're born.
It was the color of
anybody,
Netflix tuned to the channel
Exactly.
of your Wi-Fi is down or something.
But like anybody who's old enough, they automatically know what that looks like. And so it's so sort of like it's vibrant, they just know it's there. And then you have other lines like Mark Lawrence's Red Sister, where it's like when killing a nun, it's important to bring an army of sufficient size.
Love that line.
Brilliant line, because it's just like it has a level of intrigue that's just like, wait, what the fuck? What's going on? That it just hooks you in straight away.
Mark probably has just about the best prose in fantasy right now. It pains me to say that, but he's really, really, really fucking good.
I know. I refer to him as more of a sort of a writer, poet, philosopher, poet type person, to be honest, because it's just amazing. Every single line is just beautifully crafted.
I think you described him as a warrior poet on my podcast once.
Oh,
Love that line.
We need to try to. What's funny too is that Mark is constantly. I mean, most of his comments about his writing are really that he has no idea what he's doing. He's like, I don't know where to put the commas. They keep saying, put some commas here, but take these out. I don't know what's going on.
So an opening line from one of Rob's books that I really like comes from Never Die, is a prologue. It is a 2-sentence prologue. And it goes like this. Itami Cho woke to the screams of her own death. She remembered it all. End of prologue.
That I was actually going to bring up the opening of Never Die. I was hooked right away, but then I got more hooked within just the first couple pages. It was just.
Well, that was the plan with with Never Die. It was literally just like, right, hook people in straight away, get them to read more. And I just thought that's a great opening line. And I ummed and ahed whether to have it at the start of the first chapter. But then like the first chapter basically kind of rewinds a little bit to how she died. So I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to put it as a prologue. None of it makes sense anyway. Yeah, we have the future as the prologue, and then we skip back to the past, and then, oh God, it's all a mindfuck. But yeah, I just thought, have that as a single line, just opening as the prologue as well, so people sort of like, maybe like, this prologue's just a single, well, 2 lines, single sort of like, 2 sentences. And it was literally just a way to try and hook people in, to try and get people to read on. And for me, that's what an opening line should be. It should be there to make you go, I want to read more of this. And whether that's from something intriguing that makes you go, wait, what? I need to move on, or whether it's something just so visual and vibrant that you're like, I'm in this story already. Something like with Dyrk's Paternus, where it's sort of like, yeah, it has that cinematic quality that just like, you can
Really
see it
strong
in your
image.
mind. Yeah. Because you've seen it before. It's familiar. So I think that's what I aim for with an opening line.
Yeah, and you try that, and sometimes it's just a description of setting and location, but it's how you word it, right? But again, I would say for new writers, don't worry about it. I mean, I have known writers that I've talked to who like they haven't really begun because they haven't come up with that perfect opening. And it's like, don't worry about it. Go back and do it later. You know, get the story done, then you'll have a much better idea of what will work for the
I
story.
think a great example of that, and I'm just getting it up now so that I can actually read the exact line out, is the opening of Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, which is not an opening line that tries to be clever or tries to do anything particularly like gripping or profound, but it just goes like this. It's really simple, but it just gets you straight into the story right away. Will Graham sat Crawford down at a picnic table between the house and the ocean and gave him a glass of iced tea. That's it. And then basically it goes from there into these 2 people talking about this criminal case. And what it does is it realizes like, hey, we're not going to try to, do any fancy tricks with this opening line. We're just going to get you right in. And sometimes
it drops you
and it
straight
works.
in the scene, and it paints the scene just like in very few words, and just puts you there.
Yes. And that's sort of been my approach to it as well. Like I think with my opening lines, like having had to look at them in preparation for this episode, pretty much all of them will start with like mentioning who my main character is, where they are, and then usually like how they feel about something that they're doing. So for instance, like in Fires of the Dead, my opening line is, they reach the hilltop. And that's it. You know that there's like these characters who are on some sort of journey. They've arrived at some destination. Presumably there's a promise here that something is going to happen as a result of them being at this destination. And it's not like a particularly amazing line. Like it's nothing like Neuromancer, which is one of my favorite lines ever. That, or Big Brother. It was a cold day in November and the clocks were striking 13 or something like that. That's another great example of a line that does some clever wordplay or whatever. But yeah, I think you can go 2 approaches with this, but ultimately it's not something that you have to panic heaps about. It's just a sort of nice cherry if you can get it. But yeah, for me, it's as long as your opening line is creating some sort of suspense and encouraging readers to go on to the second line, then I think you've succeeded.
Yeah, that's just it. As for me, it's like either give them intrigue, suspense, give them something to hook them in, or just put them in the book.
Yep.
And there you go.
Yeah. And plenty of books just tell the story, from the very beginning. You just don't, from the beginning of the book, most stories don't start at the beginning of the story. That's the mistake I think that a lot of people make early on, is that they try to start the book at the beginning of the story. Books rarely start at the beginning of the story. Actually, none of these examples that anybody's given start at the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story is only learned later, if it's learned at all. The important thing is the journey now. So a lot of times, just write it, just tell the story. I remember agonizing over how do they do this in books. So I'd go through and look at how people did specific things and accomplished saying specific things in different books, reveals or whatever it might be. And 100% of the time I found out they just wrote it. They just wrote it.
Yeah.
They just said it. There wasn't any fancy trick to it. They just wrote it and they just said it. So that saved me a lot of time and a lot of agony once I figured that out.
Awesome. All right. Well, this episode was supposed to be about openings in general, but it was just about opening lines, which I think shows you how much there is to the topic of this. But that's fine because I really enjoyed this discussion, and maybe we'll do more opening stuff in future episodes. Let us know in the comments below or by sending us an email at wizardswarriorswords@gmail.com. What are some of your favorite opening lines that really hooked you as a reader, that stand with you years after reading them? I would love to know. Alrighty. So on that note, time to wrap up this episode. Thank you everybody for listening/watching, and we will see you next time.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
If you would like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/wizardswarriorswords, and you can check out all of the different bonuses that you can get for supporting the show. Things like free advanced reader copies, priority Q&A access, and editorial feedback. And thank you also to our high tier Patreon, Daniel Henderson.